There's a small wooden building on the corner of almost every old Appalachian farm. It's bigger than a chicken coop and smaller than a barn. The walls are darkened by years of wood smoke. The door fits tight. Inside, the rafters are dotted with iron hooks, and the air still smells faintly of hickory and salt even when the place is empty. That building is a smokehouse. For about $10 in lumber and a few weekends of work, a mountain family could build one and then use it to save hundreds of pounds of food a year indefinitely for the rest of their lives. Here's what an Appalachian smokehouse actually was, how it was built, why the details matter, and the safety lines that turn a smokehouse from a tradition into a hospital visit if you skip them. A smokehouse, at its simplest, is a small, tight building designed to do two things at once: hold meat suspended in the air and surround that meat with cool, steady smoke from a hardwood fire for hours, days, or weeks. The whole purpose of the building is to do what we covered in the meat curing video. Finish the preservation process that the salt cure started by drying the meat further, sealing it in protective smoke, and creating an environment hostile to spoilage organisms. The smokehouse and the salt cure work together. Salt does the inside-out preservation, pulling moisture out of the meat and rendering it inhospitable to bacteria. The smokehouse does the outside-in work, drying the surface and laying down a film of antimicrobial smoke compounds that further protect the meat through long aging. The traditional Appalachian smokehouse had several specific design features, each of which solved a particular problem. Size mattered. Too small, and you couldn't hang a season's worth of meat. Too large, and you couldn't keep the temperature and smoke even throughout. The classic mountain smokehouse was roughly 8 feet square and 7 to 8 feet tall. Big enough to hang 20 to 30 hams plus bacons and shoulders, small enough that a single small fire could fill it with steady smoke. Construction was usually heavy timber framing with thick log or board walls. The walls weren't insulated in the modern sense, but they were thick enough, and the building was small enough that the temperature stayed reasonably steady once it was running. Some mountain smokehouses were built of stone or brick, which held heat even better but cost more in labor. The roof was steeply pitched, often with a small vent or louvered cap at the peak. The pitch served two purposes: it shed rain, and it gave the smoke somewhere to collect and slowly escape. The vent at the peak was small, deliberately, because you wanted the smoke to linger in the building before leaving. A modern smoker often has a controllable damper at the top. The old smokehouse had a fixed small opening that the builder had sized by experience. The door was tight-fitting. You wanted to be able to close the smokehouse up and have smoke stay inside. A loose door wastes smoke and runs the temperature unevenly. The traditional door was heavy, often weather-stripped with felt or leather, and latched firmly. Inside, the building was simple: a dirt or stone floor, often with a fire pit dug into the center. Iron hooks driven into the rafters or set into a system of crossbeams. Sometimes a wooden rack near the ceiling for additional hanging space. That was the entire interior. The fire location was where the design got specific. Two traditions ran through Appalachia. The first, simpler approach was a small fire pit in the center of the smokehouse floor, where the family would maintain a low, slow fire of hickory or other hardwood directly beneath the hanging meat. The fire was always small. You wanted smoke, not flame, and managed carefully through the smoking days. The second approach was a separate firebox built into one wall of the smokehouse, with the smoke piped into the building through a low opening. This kept the heat farther from the meat and allowed for true cold smoking, keeping the smokehouse interior in the 80 to 90 degree range while the fire itself burned hotter outside the building. Cold smoking is the technique used for long-aged country hams, and a separate firebox makes it much easier to control. The fuel was always hardwood, and in Appalachia, hickory was the gold standard. Oak was used too, sometimes apple or maple. The wood was usually allowed to burn down to glowing coals, then covered with green wood chips or sawdust to produce the slow, smoldering smoke without much flame. A mountain family who knew what they were doing could keep a smokehouse running at the right temperature for days with surprisingly small amounts of wood, just by managing the fire carefully. If this is the kind of mountain knowledge you want more of, our free Appalachian Almanac goes out every Sunday. One real method, sourced and tested, in your inbox. Links in the description. Now, the safety lines, because they matter as much for the building as for the curing inside it. The first safety consideration is fire. A smokehouse is, by definition, a small building with an active fire inside it for days or weeks at a time. The mountain families lost more than a few smokehouses, and occasionally houses, to fires that got out of hand. The siting rules were strict. The smokehouse went a safe distance away from the main house and the barn, with cleared ground around it, ideally downwind in the prevailing weather. Fire-safe construction mattered, and the floor and lower walls near the fire were often built of stone for that reason. If you're building or running a smokehouse today, the same rules apply, and they're more important than ever in places with dry seasons. Site it away from structures and combustibles. Keep cleared ground around it. Don't leave a hot smokehouse unattended overnight, especially in the early hours of a smoke when the fire is still actively burning. The second safety consideration is food safety, which we covered in detail in the meat curing video. The same rules apply. Use tested recipes. Use the right curing salts for the products that need them. Maintain proper temperatures. Cold smoking is genuinely tricky, and a smokehouse that drifts too warm puts meat in the bacterial danger zone where harmful organisms can grow. A simple electronic thermometer with a probe inside the smokehouse and an alarm if the temperature climbs above a set point is cheap insurance and would have saved a lot of mountain families a lot of grief if they'd had access to it. The third consideration is carbon monoxide. A burning fire produces carbon monoxide, and a tight smokehouse can fill with it. The mountain families didn't routinely climb inside their smokehouses while a fire was running, but if you do for any reason, checking on the meat, adjusting the wood, never linger in a smoke-filled smokehouse, and ventilate it before working inside. The modern home version of a smokehouse, scaled appropriately, is achievable and reasonable to build. A simple smokehouse for a family, handling a hog's worth of meat each year, can be built from basic lumber with a separate firebox and a thermometer for a few $100s in materials and a weekend or two of work. There are tested plans available from agricultural extension services and traditional homesteading resources. Use a plan that's been tested. Don't improvise the dimensions or the firebox placement on your first build. If you're not ready to build a smokehouse, and most people reading this don't have the land, the time, or the meat volume to justify one, a modern home smoker can produce many of the same results at a much smaller scale. A small electric or charcoal smoker will handle bacons, hams, and other cured products honestly well, with much easier temperature control than the traditional smokehouse. The mountain method, scaled down to a backyard smoker, is a perfectly legitimate way to enter this tradition. The smokehouse is a kind of building that's almost extinct in modern America. The reasons are the same as the reasons the curing tradition itself faded. The freezer replaced it, the supply chain replaced it, and the labor of running it became something most families weren't doing anymore. The buildings still standing in old hollers are usually being used for storage or have been left to fall in. Once in a while, a family will restore one and start smoking meat again, and it's always a kind of small miracle when they do. What the smokehouse represents, beyond the meat it produces, is a piece of infrastructure that was a permanent part of a household. You built it once. You used it twice a year, maybe more. It paid you back every winter with food that didn't need refrigeration, food that lasted, food that tasted like nothing the grocery store could match. A $10 building, in the dollars of 1925, that became one of the most useful structures on the farm. Most modern Americans don't know what one looks like. Most modern Americans have never tasted real cold-smoked, dry-aged country ham. Both of those facts are losses in their small way. They're not catastrophes, but they're an example of what we've quietly traded for the convenience of the freezer and the supermarket. A small dark building, a slow hickory fire, a season of meat hanging from iron hooks. The Appalachian way of putting up a year's food in a structure you built yourself, and the honest care it takes to do it safely. The USDA guidance on home smokehouses, the extension service plans for tested smokehouse construction, and the food safety references on cold smoking are all linked in the description. If you want all of these methods in one place, the Appalachian Way Field Guide has 47 of them with the original sources behind each one. Link below. Real methods, real sources, real history. That's the Appalachian Way. We'll see you Monday.